Hello everyone. Today we're going to be doing a rebuttal video on an interview with an atheist. Uh, we're calling this atheist a teapotist. We did about an hour conversation with this atheist, and we broke him down in five parts. And we kind of let this conversation kind of go organic and just let it go wherever it goes. And you'll notice when you're debating with atheists, they have very similar talking points, especially the ones that are experienced in debate and the ones that what I call a militant atheists that don't want theism to exist, and they have kind of a bone to pick, and they really don't like God because there's certain atheists that don't believe God exists but don't really have a hatred towards God. And there's some atheists you can tell that they have a motive to stomp out atheism and just kind of crush them. And these are the type when you debate, you have to be prepared and understand their mentality and catch them. And really, to the conversation I had with this atheist is not very good because I just let it go all over the place, and I did that on purpose because I knew I was going to do a rebuttal and kind of break it down. Later on, I'd like to talk to the same atheist and have a actual topic and keep them in line. So we're gonna start the video, and I'll pause it from time to time to comment on the argument. Here we go. Hello, everybody. Today we're interviewing with a gentleman that we call a teapotist. Mr. Teapotist, please say hello to the audience.
Hello, all 8 of your audience. I mean, hello. Can you have Gabe cut it out? Hi, guys.
No, that's fine. We can leave that in there. All jokes are welcome. The teapotist happens to be what I would call an atheist. I'm not sure if that's correct. Are you considering yourself an atheist? Now, this particular question, I know this atheist, and I know he doesn't like to be called an atheist, and I've spoken to many atheists that don't even like the term atheist, and you'll see what a huge deal he's going to make with this term atheist.
Well, I don't collect stamps. Am I an A stamp collector? I don't believe in Poseidon. Am I a Poseidonist? So the term atheist that you throw around with agnostic and believer, it's just in the English language, it does not make sense to me. If you aren't a mechanic, are you a mechanicus? Like the term you're throwing out is just ludicrous, starting with the English language.
Well, obviously, if there was no theists, we wouldn't be calling you an atheist. So the reason you're called an atheist is because there's such a thing as a theist.
So right, so it's just the converse of that. So then why wouldn't you call me an agriculturist? Because there are people that do agriculture for a living, and you don't participate in that. Do you refer to yourself as an agriculturist and hold YouTube videos regarding that? Yeah, so if we're discussing people that do agriculture and others, we could call them non-agriculturists. If that's what they're in the field of agriculture, everybody else is a non-agriculturist or a mechanic. Right. This is the mechanic industry. These are the mechanics, and this group is a non-mechanic. So yes, if they're in the same room and we're comparing them, I would call them that just so we know where they stand, where their position is. Yeah. So this seems like a very simple concept, but there's a reason why the atheists don't want to be called an atheist, because the term theist to them is a ridiculous concept. They want that to be wiped off of the language of everyone. They don't want theism to exist. So because theism exists, atheism exists. So there's an underlining thought of why this atheist and other atheists doesn't like the term atheist, because I think it makes perfectly good sense that if we're in a room full of mechanics and everybody's a mechanic,
everybody that's not a mechanic in that room would be considered the general public, would be considered, in this situation, non-mechanics, right? Because we're discussing a certain topic, either the mechanics or agricultures. Everybody else that's in that room, that's not in that field, that does something else, would be the converse of that. And in this situation, the fact that we're talking about God, we're talking about theism, and we're saying, well, since you don't subscribe to God, you must be an atheist. And looks like this atheist is taking offense to this term and doesn't want to be called that. But we'll see if we can twist his arm and let him not argue a ridiculous point in order for us to make some progress. Here we go.
For
The
our
mechanics or
purposes,
non-mechanics?
yeah, in the interest of carrying on the conversation,
Yes,
yes, you
yes,
can
yes,
refer
yes,
to
because
an
I know,
atheist.
I do,
It's quite a ridiculous term.
well, it's only
And
to,
I'm going to refer to you, for our purposes, I'm going to call you a non-stamp collector,
I
since you
love
don't
it.
collect
I love it,
stamps.
yes. And
Okay,
I think the
so
reference
I
is
won't
to,
call you a theist, but you're the non-stamp collector, and you can call me the atheist in return.
gotcha, okay. But just so our audience understands, the stamp collector, what is, where does that come from? What does that mean?
Well, you don't collect stamps.
Correct.
Is that correct? So I'm going to
And
refer
you
to you as a
do,
non-stamp collector.
and you
No,
said,
no, I don't.
okay.
No, I
And
don't.
is our
But you want
discussion
to
have
refer
any,
to me?
does our discussion have anything to do with stamp collecting? Right now, we're talking
No.
about, is there a God or isn't there a God?
Oh, sure. Okay, yeah, we can definitely discuss that. And then my position is that there isn't a God, but
Correct.
to have a term that says atheist specifically for that, then we would need terms for the converse of everything, right? If you say there's theists and then there's non-theists, we're going to call them atheists. Then I'm going to call you the converse of every word
Correct.
in the English language that could be a noun or like something you identify with.
Sure.
If you don't do that, I'll call you the opposite.
So you see, he's still stuck on this converse of theism because he really doesn't like the term. So he gets into this stamp collecting and non-stamp collecting, even though he's not a stamp collector. He's going to call me a non-stamp collector, but then he should call himself a non-stamp collector. So the argument in itself doesn't make any sense. He's doing everything he can to remove the term. And what you have to do when you're arguing with atheists, you have to um, show them how silly their argument is. Because remember, they're more talking on anger and emotion. Most of these atheists hate God, so they're not speaking with their rational thought. So you have to try to bring them back to reality. Let them know that a non-stamp collector and a stamp collector has nothing to do with the topic. If we're in a room full of stamp collectors, we're at a convention, and I go with a bunch of friends that are all stamp collectors, and I meet their other stamp collecting friends, and they ask me, "Oh, are you a stamp collector?" I would say, "No, I'm a non-stamp collector. I'm just here listening to your conversation about stamp collecting." So in that case, the terms would apply. In this case, those terms don't apply, but theism and atheism do apply in these terms. So as soon as you talk to an atheist and they bring up the subject, you have to hammer them down and let them know that atheism, atheist is an acceptable term. If they can't accept that term, they need to come up with a different term so we understand each other, right? So uh, I've had these silly conversations with many atheists, and I want you guys to all experience these things because if you're going to talk to atheists and do apologetics, you're going to run into this argument many times.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
the ludicrousness of
Well,
the
well,
theists.
well, let's follow the
Especially
logic.
when that's the only thing that runs your life, right? And when you think it's a legitimate project to take hours out of your day to discuss this thing that we know doesn't exist, and it just doesn't seem like a legitimate project for a grown ass man to be holding these conversations about something that doesn't exist.
Now you're going to get to the heart of the subject. This atheist and many other atheists despise theism. They don't want anybody to talk about theism. And he just said that he knows that God doesn't exist. But I will, through the course of time, get him to admit that he's not sure 100% that God doesn't exist. Through questioning, through taking him back through the cosmological argument, the moral argument, and other arguments that's going to squeeze him. So this same term that he just said, that he knows that God doesn't exist, that theism shouldn't exist, thus atheism shouldn't exist, right? So we're going to make them eat these words, and that's what you have to do. You have to pinpoint them. You have to document this when they say they know, and you have to get them to say that. Many of them are slick, and they're not going to really say we don't know, we're not sure. But many of them will say we're not sure, and in the same sentence or the very next sentence, they'll say, well, we know God doesn't exist. It can't exist. But in a couple sentences ago, you said that you're sure God didn't exist, and now you're not sure. So they go back and forth, and you have to catch them. I call them being slippery because every time you try and pinpoint them and lock them down, they're going to slip from you. But theism, in my search for the truth, cannot be slippery because I'm building the truth from the ground up. So I start with the cosmological argument, the Kalam cosmological argument to be exact, and I build on top of that. In the beginning, the universe had a beginning, it started. And if you go to the Bible, it also says, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. So that means that my reality, which is the cosmological argument, lines up directly with the Bible, which God says he began the universe. And that means that everything from there builds on top of it. As soon as we get to a point where somebody comes up with proof that the universe existed eternally and never began, that will knock down my entire house of cards. And I like to call it a house of cards because it's very fragile. You're building the truth on top of other truth on top of other truth. And at any point, if somebody comes along and makes a good argument to knock down any of your arguments below, that means all of your arguments above that will be knocked down. You have to start all over again. Now, if they knock down the first one, you gotta start from zero. But let's say they knocked down your fourth or fifth block of your argument, then you can go back down to the fifth and then build up from there. But that's how fragile it is. But the atheist, they'll never build nothing. They'll be very slippery. And my intention is to lock them in, to get them to commit to say something. For instance, if they say no, God doesn't exist, and they're sure of it, then when we discuss certain things that we don't know about, for instance, the beginning of the universe and how everything started, they can't say they don't know. They have to say, oh yeah, we know it started this way and that way. They can't say, well, we don't know, because as soon as they don't know, then it could be God, it could be many other things, but they can't take God off the table as soon as they say they don't know, unless they have some kind of proof that it's not God, and that proof doesn't exist, because I guess you can't prove a negative, and they can't disprove it. So in this sense, when they're confident of something, you have to capture that and ask them how they're so confident. And really, they're confident because they have a hatred. They're not using their mind, they're using their hearts. And you'll see that in this comment that this atheist made, that he despises the fact that there's theists wasting their time thinking and talking about God and about the existence. But at the end of the day, shouldn't every human being on earth who's ever existed think about their own existence and how the universe started and these big questions? If you go on through life not thinking about these deep subjects, you're not going to know anything regarding why you're here, and you're not going to know where you're going. You're going to just be floating through space and never question these deep philosophical questions that people have been pondering for millennia. But this atheist seems to think it's a silly thing to think about it or ask about it or talk about it, but it's out of hatred. And if you really think about what you're doing here, you're playing psychologist. This is not just a uh, argument on facts. You have to start looking at the person of why they're like this. You know, maybe a certain atheist, something bad happened to them in their childhood, in their life, where they got angry at God to a point where they said, well, since this happened, then that means you don't exist. And now, anytime you bring them proof and discuss this subject, they're locked in. Their brain is locked in. Their heart's locked in that God doesn't exist. But they're not talking in a rational way. So our job is to bring back rationale and logic and philosophy and try to disassociate feelings and emotions and try to really pinpoint them to just the facts. And we'll discuss later on the cosmological argument in depth. But I noticed that when I talk about the Kalam, almost every atheist, as soon as I brought up the cosmological argument and I brought up the Kalam, they immediately said, well, yeah, I guess there was a cause, but it's not God. Well, I said, I never said it was God. I just said it looks like from the Kalam's argument that there has to be a cause, but they immediately say, but it's not God. And I bring them back again and say, I didn't say it was God. And it goes on and on. I try to bring them back to talk about the cause and how it started. And again, in their brain, they're hardwired in to try and disprove God, not look for the truth, mind you. That's another key. Most of these atheists have an agenda, and their agenda is to disprove God because they don't want God to exist. And they're not looking for the truth. So you need to rein them back in. You need to do some I call it maybe word judo, where we're almost it's a like a wrestling match, a fight, that you have to bring them back in, and don't ever let them get a edge on you where they start running a narrative and escaping any of the steps that you need. You need to bring them back in. Every time they try and escape, you need to make them answer the question, satisfy the question, and then kind of document what they said, because you're going to hang them on those words. And then later on, as time goes on, as soon as they contradict what they just said, you bring it right back and say, wait a second, didn't you just say this here? How could you say it's here? It sounds like you're a hypocrite. Let's get your facts straight. Let's maybe rework your whole entire thought process, because now you're contradicting yourself. And I will hold myself to the same standard that I don't want to contradict myself. As soon as I contradict myself, I want to be I want to be made aware of that so I can correct it. But we'll continue with this atheist, and you'll see how much of a hatred he's showing in his his thoughts and the way he's speaking and what his motive is. And it's probably not apparent until you break it down, and that's always very important to start breaking down some of these conversations. Here we go.
The problem is that I believe that God does exist. So that's why I
Okay.
hold these conversations.
That is a problem. You're right. You're right. That
Sure.
is a
So,
problem.
but I could be wrong, and that's why when I talk to atheists, they can either help me get away from being wrong, or maybe are going to help me become more into my belief in God. But let's
Well,
get
let's
back
get
to
this
the.
straight. I don't wish to get anybody away from their belief in God. If that's what you need, to, like, if you need to wake up in the morning and decide how the universe began, and then and only then can you run your life and decide how to live, then I don't want to take that away from you. I think it's not a legitimate project to run your life around that. But, I don't want to dissuade you from that. There are lots of terrible, terrible people on the core, but for the fear of a, like a delayed punishment or a delayed gratification, this is what they'll believe. I want those people to continue. So there is a utility in religion. It keeps really bad people from doing bad things, and on the other side, religion will get. If you want to get somebody, a really good person, to do a bad thing, interject religion in his life, right? So with the Muslim fundamentalists, they might be good people, but introduce religion in their life, and then you'll see what really terrible things they do. Cut the foreskin off of their child's penis. Just some other absolutely ridiculous things that, genital mutilation based on religion. And these might be good people.
Sure, I could see that religion, how it could be bad, it could be good. But as far as how it pertains to me,
It's a utility. It's a
sure.
utility, right? To
As far as
control simple-minded. Yeah, it can control simple-minded people
sure.
from doing really bad things because the promise of a delayed gratification, as in eternity in heaven.
I just thought about this, and I wish I would have thought about it while I was speaking to the atheist, because if he's thinking that the only way that only utility to religion is to control simple-minded people, to get them to do good because fear of of uh, of repercussions, then at the same time somebody that doesn't buy into religion, and I'm going to call them an atheist, uh, what happens to them? They just do whatever they want, right? So if they have nothing, no standard to meet, then how does he address that problem? And he doesn't. And then he'll at the same time flip it and say, well, because of religion, people do a lot of evil things. And it's true that everything can be manipulated. Human beings can be manipulated. When we talk about religion, we talk about um, the religious uh, context, the exact saying of that religion. We have to measure those things on their exact merit and not what people did with them, right? So you have lots of evil Christians that took the terms of the Bible and slavery and try to justify slavery in America. Did the Bible, did God ever condone slavery? No. But of course, atheists will try to use that against Christianity and say, oh, look at all those Christian churches and Christians preaching uh, the Bible to try to uh, justify slavery. And they're absolutely right. But that has nothing to do with Christianity. It has everything to do with that person that manipulated the teachings. We'll continue.
So for that case, if not, I'm not saying you, but there are many people that may be doing really bad things, but for the fear of God and the fear of going into a eternity of hell. So for those kind of simple-minded people, heaven and hell and God and religion are necessary.
Of course, it definitely serves a purpose. But as far as I'm concerned, I would much prefer that there is no God, because then I can do whatever I want. I think I would be much, much happier if there wasn't a God. So really,
Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever tried living a week or two or a month or a year as if there's no God? What difference will it do in your life having there is no God? Just try it.
So here, the atheist is trying to justify religion, and I'm flipping it on him by telling him that I have uh, no purpose of creating a God for myself. If that was up to me, I would create no God, or a God that tells me I can do whatever I want, that I'm a God myself, and try to fill myself with things that'll help me. And there's many religions that uh, appeal, I would say, to humans, but Christianity, if we break it down and understand what Jesus is expecting out of us, he pretty much tells us that uh, if you accept Christianity, you're going to be hated, you're going to be persecuted in my name. There's going to be, uh, many horrible things that will come to you because of me, and you can't do whatever you want. There's a standard uh, that's above you, that's God, and we have to follow that standard, even if you don't want to follow it. We're all sinners. We all are made of flesh and blood, and we tend to have uh, evil sins in our heart, but because of God, we know that we have to fight that temptation, or else everybody will be good. We all need God, and that would be um, no purpose for why God Jesus came down, or why God intervened in our life if we're all good. But the whole problem that Jesus came to solve is the problem of sin, and uh, the fact that this atheist is trying to convince me that it would be better for me to try to be an atheist and pretend God doesn't exist, sure, I would try that, but I would have to lie to myself. I would have to ignore all the facts, and that would not be a good thing at the end of the day. And that's what I'm going to explain to him.
Live godless.
Let's put it this way: it wouldn't be good. The results would be pretty much a complete 180. I'd hate to think that way. But
So you're one of those people that are really rotten on the inside, but for the fear of a God and the promise of a delayed gratification of heaven or a punishment for an eternity.
But he just called me rotten on inside. I'm just being honest that I'm a human and I have a sin nature. And by the way, so does he and so does everybody else. So for him to assume that I am evil and I'm only being held back by God, at the end of the day, every human has the ability to do evil. And because God put in their heart the laws of morality and objective morality, is the reason why they don't do evil. Because even though they want to do evil, it's going to help them, they'll make them happier. End of the day, they know not to, because in the long run it's going to hurt them. So everything that we talk about as far as sin is concerned is for temporary gratification and not permanent. God only wants permanent.
That's why you believe in religion. So
Well-
there's and I was just giving a nuanced case,
sure.
but it turns out you're one of those situations, right? Like I was just trying to offer anecdotal evidence for some really bad people that will do good things just for that, but you are the anecdote in this scenario, and I'm sure there's many others
fit
like
in.
you.
I fit in very nicely. So the fact that you even brought that up, it's a good coincidence, because if there is no God and there is no morality, it's just a matter of opinion, then
Well, hang on a second there,
oh
Professor.
boy, here we go.
No one said that there's no morality,
Oh,
right? If you wanted to say that without God we don't have morality, that's a whole nother conversation that I can point you to Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris.
By the way, Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris has the absolute worst argument for morality or objective morality. Uh, when they argue with other apologetic, they know that they shouldn't argue that there is no such thing as um, objective morality. They have to say there is objective morality, or else morality would be subjective, and their audience, and they would not be able to win any kind of argument saying that morality is subjective, it's all opinion. And I've argued with many atheists that say that there is no such thing as objective morality. It's all subjective. It's all a matter of opinion. And of course, then I drag them through the mud when they make these arguments. And if anybody else hears these arguments, let's say somebody's on a fence and doesn't know if they believe in God, don't believe in God, and as soon as they hear an atheist say there's no such thing as morality, that everything is opinion, all of a sudden they know in their heart that that's not true. So the atheist actually pushes people away they push people away from atheism and put them towards theism. And Sam Harris and others like him really do a horrible job because they try to justify morality on, is it good for the public? Is it good for everybody? Is it good for um, uh, the continuing of the human race? And then there's many theists that will make an amazing argument that will crush every uh, atheist argument that says, oh, the more that the um human race, succeeds and multiplies, is better, then the theist would say, well, then rape should be allowed because that would procreate society and you'd have a bigger society. But then they all know that would be a ridiculous way to argue. But the atheist can't argue against that rape theory because everything's really a matter of opinion. Why would that opinion be wrong if there is no standard, there's no objective morality? If it's I can make up my own objective morality, you can make up your own objective morality, and they're both opposite, then how can you argue? And at the end of the day, the atheist cannot argue, and you can watch some of those debates that the Sam Harrises make. They are just mind-numbing arguments that every theist with two brain cells can just destroy that argument with a couple of sentences here and there, and it doesn't make any sense why these atheists say what they say. But of course, this AT pod is really pushing these type of I would call them his heroes because they really love these type of guys. There's Aaron Ra, there's Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins. These guys are the ones that really push atheism, and I call it really the religion of atheism because really, the more you listen to the atheist viewpoint, it sounds more and more like a religion, a cult, something that doesn't require proof. It's just pretty much a feeling that they have. We'll continue.
Many other great philosopher thinkers in this space that will tell you that morality does not require a God, just the opposite. The things that your God has put out, the filth. The Old Testament is just an absolute terrible book of things that this moral God that you're calling.
Now, I think if you just look at that one sentence right there, it looks like this particular atheist despises God, despises the Old Testament. The fact that he called it the filth, it's really an emotional sentence, right? It wasn't just a stating facts. It was more, how could your God do these things in the Old Testament that he did? And obviously, if he starts giving me examples, then I will easily point out that he misunderstood the problem, and it wasn't the fact that God was evil, it was the fact that God had to do something to get justice. So if God told one group of people to kill another group of people, it wasn't because God was on a war path and he just wanted to kill people for no reason. There was a perfectly good reason why he told this group to kill this other group. But when you give these examples to the atheist, right away they're going to pretend they don't exist. They'll jump onto another subject. They'll start talking about other religions that did other bad things, and will pretty much sweep under the rug this whole conversation. And that's what you have to catch them on. When you make a point, you have to bring them back into that point and say, address this. What do you think about this? What do you think about these people that did these horrible things that had to be punished? What will you do if you were God and you saw this happening? Would you just let it go? Wouldn't that make you evil? Wouldn't you want them to be punished and have them stop doing these things? You have to put these hard questions into the atheist brain, and I almost guarantee you they're going to reject your question. They're going to dance around. They're going to be slippery atheists. They're not going to want to stand still and take those type of punches because they know they can't stand long in that line of fire and be able to answer that question honestly and still be an atheist and still say God is wrong when they themselves would have to judge those horrible things, and they themselves would have to say, okay, yeah, those people deserve death. They deserve to, somehow you got to stop them from doing this evil, and sometimes death is the only way to stop them, and that is actually justice. But remember, atheists for the most part are slippery, and that's why they became atheists. Some atheists maybe never got the information about God the way I'm presenting and other apologists will present it. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Once they're presented with the evidence, once we rationally talk about these things, then they can make a decision and think, oh yeah, they were that evil. I didn't know that this group was that evil and that's why they're being punished. Well, then that makes sense. I guess I could see why God did that. Then they'll move on to the next subject. But most atheists will, after that information is given to them, will still persist that God is evil and will do everything they can to not answer the questions. And with this particular atheist, my promise is that I'm going to pinpoint them down in certain subjects and topics that are so small and minute that I'm going to ask him this question point blank, and that's going to be what the conversation is about. And I'm going to see what he says. Uh, and as soon as he goes a little bit too far from the subject, we're going to bring him right back in. So then we're going to have to document his answers about these certain subjects that they that they uh, that they were accusing God of being evil for doing these things. When we put them in God's position, where we say, "Well, what would you do? What's your opinion on this? How would you handle this?" We're gonna document it, because then when if God kills people or takes their life or orders another group to kill another group, uh, then when God doesn't do something about evil, then the same atheist will complain and say, how come God's not doing something about the evil? And then when you document the times that God did something about evil and they got angry, and then when God doesn't do something, then you want to take these 2 points and say, wait a second, didn't you say here in this area that you're condemning God for doing something? And the very next sentence, when God doesn't do anything, you're condemning him. Looks like he can't win because you're contradicting yourself. And that's how you catch these atheists, with their contradictions. And if you talk to any atheist for a good amount of time, you'll catch them in hundreds of contradictions. I mean, they just can't help themselves. Here we go.
Has just, it served punishment on hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people at one point, the entire globe. And that's the morality that you're getting it from?
Okay.
Invisible man in the sky forbid.
So what you're saying, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So you believe there is a such thing as a objective morality?
There is morality without.
This atheist had to think about that because he knows where this conversation is going to go. And you're going to see he's going to dodge this question for now. But I got this atheist number, and we're going to discuss this topic of objective morality thoroughly. He's only dodged this question for now, but my plans are to box him into a corner, and at the end of that discussion, he's going to come out swinging. And I know this atheist in particular, that every time I do get him in a corner, something, it's like a switch flips where he starts going on tangents. I mean, he's not going to swing at me, but it's almost at that point where you could see I triggered him. I touched a nerve. Uh, there's almost no way to solve this. And I've even gotten this atheist and the other atheists to then say, well, we just don't know. Okay, great. So if you don't know, then you can't say I'm wrong, right? We have to catch them in those moments. And those are the moments that could turn people, right? When they hit that brick wall, and you as apologetic has to make them hit that brick wall. You have to be that brick wall, right? So once you catch them on something, you can't let off, because that's the point where they're going to turn back to reality, when they hit that brick wall. And that's when you have to press them the best you can to say, I don't know. And then you document that I don't know. Okay, so you said I don't know. Perfect. That's what I was looking for, because there's nothing I hate more than a confident atheist that knows everything. I like atheists when they say they don't know, because then next time they say that they know something, we'll say, wait a second, you didn't know right here. How is it that you know here? Where did you get your information that you know so much? But when I squeeze you on this point, you said you don't know. So we have to catch them on these type of arguments in order to have them hit that brick wall that we're all looking for them to hit.
God, now if you want to call that objective or subjective or whatnot, but so that's another.
Again, he's gonna start playing with terms, because he didn't like atheists, he doesn't like theism, and now this atheist and many others will say, this term objective, this term subjective. It's not a term, it's more in line with reality. It's either there is morality that no one can argue against, that everybody knows, that is kind of unwritten, but it's actually written in our heart and our mind. Every human knows it. Or it's just a matter of opinion. And that's why it'd be subjective, that everybody has a different opinion. No one is wrong or right. And it's pretty much a free for all. And this atheist just got caught pretty much trying to dissolve that term objective and subjective, but not for long. Again, we would document these type of conversations. When he doesn't want to use these terms, we'd see what terms they want to use, and then bring them back and say, well, what was wrong with these terms, objective and subjective? What did you have? What problem did you have with them? Were you looking for a different word? And when we get into these specific topics, and we'll try to pinpoint it down next time we talk to this atheist, to speak specifically about the terms objective and subjective. And really, that's when you really break down to atheists, when you get down into details and force them to uh, break down their point. Because what lots of atheists like to do, and you'll see in these next few um topic discussions we're going to have, we didn't stick to a topic. There's more. He was taking jabs at me, and none of them were knockout blows. They were just little mosquito bites, punches is what he was doing. As soon as I try to say, well, let's talk about that, he would jump off to another one and another one, and they're all mosquito bite punches where they don't do any harm. They're pretty much a waste of time. But when I want to get down to the bare bones, this atheist in particular and many others, they will be true to their term of a slippery atheist, and they'll slip out of it. And the only way to get them is to say, okay, this is the topic for today. We're going to stay on topic as best we can. If you go bring an example of this topic to prove a point, it has to be very specific. You can't, if we're talking about Christianity, you can't say, well, oh, look at what this religion does. Or if we talk about specifically the Christian teachings, you can't tell me what a particular church did that was evil. I'm talking about the actual teachings, the interpretations, and I would define the interpretations for him. If he says, "Oh, well, this is highly debated, we're not in terms," I'll say, "Well, let's use let's make me the standard, and you argue against what my interpretation is. I don't care what 50 other people interpret this particular passage. You can argue against me. I'm the one sitting in front of you. This is my viewpoint. Let me be the standard." Then they can't slip away and start bringing other examples of that interpretation in, and that's when you really break down the atheist into their core, because once they can't slip away, they're pretty much naked. They have nowhere to hide. It's you and them. They need to come up with some facts, and I'm confident that they have nothing. And the way you can be confident is by constantly debating with atheists, and that's why I always say something that really is kind of a joke or it's something funny, but I always say, thank God for atheists because they make me a better Christian. Because when you discuss with atheists their viewpoint, you see all the arguments, you already know what they're going to say on certain topics before they say it. A few times, a few atheists have surprised me with a few things I didn't hear of, and think, oh, that was a good uh, viewpoint. I never thought of it that way. But now I pull that in because I did talk to the atheist. I thought about something in a way where I didn't think about it before, which I recommend every Christian that wants to be closer to God, wants to be a better Christian, should discuss with the atheists. In particular with the atheists, not other religions, because then you're going to start talking about your religion against their religion. The reason that atheist is a better uh, tool to use pretty much to sharpen yourself is because they have erased all logic. They pretty much have said that nothing created nothing when we discuss about the cosmological argument and many other arguments that they pretty much close their eyes and say, "Oh, it doesn't exist. That's not. I don't see it." And a good one is when we talk about the design. They say, "I don't see design. What design?" You look at some of the most complicated insects and things in nature that could not have evolved. You can't even explain how they can evolve. Well, they'll say, well, if you waited long enough and billions and trillions of years, this could happen. Where clearly I can't see it happening. There's no way it would happen in an infinite amount of years. It just wouldn't evolve this way. And the atheist will try and convince you of that. And that's why it's good to talk to them to get into their mind, to see how when you're speaking to somebody irrational, more emotional than rational, how to convince them to come back to being rational. We'll continue.
That would be a conversation that would take more than the 15 minutes that a YouTube video should last.
Right. So we're just skimming over the topics. So we might be bouncing around. This is just organic. But the reason I'm uh, I'm saying that Christianity would be better for me if it was not true, because then I can do whatever I want. The reason I don't do whatever I want, because I know there's a set standard, objective morality, that I can't do those things because they're wrong. And when I measure those things I want to do to the objective morality of what I say, there's a God, then it deters me because I know that there is a judgment, there is right and wrong. I can't do whatever I want. I have to do what's right in order to be right with God, because there is a God.
Well, that ended the first part. Sorry to drag down. There's just so much to talk about when you're discussing these topics. And the more you dig deep into these conversations, the better you'll be at apologetics. And at the end of the day, the closer you'll be to God and you'll understand God. And I'm going to always beat this point home that there's many Christians that read the Bible, that think they know something about God, but they don't really know God on a personal level. But when you do apologetics and you're questioned about God, or you're there having to defend God, and really that's what you're doing. You are becoming a attorney. You are a public defender. God is being accused of a crime. You now have to understand why God did something and then defend God to these atheists that are accusing him of being evil, accusing him of not existing. Now you have to defend him. How do you defend him if you don't know why he did this? You don't understand him. And that's why I say you'd be a much better Christian if you did apologetics and you did discussions with atheists rather than just going reading the Bible, singing, and not really thinking about it. And I've talked to many other Christians, which that might be another uh, avenue we'll have to take the channel into, as far as talking to other Christians and let them understand who God is and see what their understanding is. Because I have talked to many Christians that when times were good, they're Christians, they believe in God, and when times are bad, all of a sudden they're mad at God. And those are the ones that will become atheists in a heartbeat because they're kind of fair weather Christians. Because when times get bad, they start turning to atheism or other religions because they didn't understand why God allowed this. They didn't understand that God can't do something wrong. So when they accuse him of doing something wrong, the definition of God is being questioned, right? If we're saying somebody is eternal and all knowing and they allowed something to happen and you disagreed with it, then you're saying God made a mistake. He didn't know what was going to happen. He knows what's going to happen before it happened. He has full control. When he allows something to happen, even if you don't like it, even if it's horrible, you accept it because you trust that God is all knowing, all powerful, and he allowed these things to happen. But you have to understand God. You have to know him on a personal level in order to have that viewpoint of God. And I think that apologetics is the way to go. And I'm very disappointed that many churches don't don't promote apologetics. Some do, and that's a very good thing that they're growing a good foundation of Christians. But many Christians would never ever dream about debating or arguing with an atheist or somebody that's not in their faith. First of all, they can't do it, and secondly, it would bother them. It wouldn't be advantageous. They would say, "I'll let God take care of it," or "They're going to hell," or somehow they would justify that they're saved and that's all they need. They might say one or two sentences to that person, but as soon as the fight got a little bit ugly and accusations started flying and they didn't really know how to answer the question, they would immediately just say, "The hell with you," and that would be over. But really, they're missing out when they don't have that conversation. And I blame the churches that don't promote apologetics. So hopefully we'll continue with these type of debates, and hopefully you learn something, I learned something, and we continue to grow and understand God. Thank you very much.